Hello and welcome to Gathering Conversations, which can be found on the Gatherings Place website or on YouTube, or we also do Audible podcasts from the Apple Store, locations where you can find podcasts. Welcome to today's episode number 21 on Friday, February 21st, 21. I'm surprised we've made it to 21 episodes. This is more work than I had ever realized, but we're having a lot of fun with it, especially the stories, mostly because we're just hearing some wonderful stories how God works in people's lives. This week, we're going to do part two of the Burgins. Short announcement time this week because the Burgins is just a little bit longer. So let me just tease us with next week will be Chad Cornwell. Great story. A couple weeks after that, 1 week after that would be the Walker family. Tyrone Walker and his wife Samantha. Wonderful story. That'll probably be a two-part episode. So then let's get into the Burgins part two this week. Thank you.
Let's dive into the Gathering Conversations podcast. We're here to have genuine conversations about understanding what it means to be a Christian and how to live a truthful life that pleases Him. Our goal is to equip others to share the teachings of Christ with others. So, let's jump into today's conversation.
And one of the ladies in the church said, you need to take that 90-day job in Memphis because your wife lives there. I said, Susan, I'm going to be there 90 days. You know, I don't do anything that fast. She goes, but God said.
So Susan had been praying for you.
Yes. And she said, but God said she's there. I was like, okay, roger that. And so I went there for a 90-day work vacation, was going to come back to Oklahoma. And so the contracting company picked me up full time. So I went back and turned over my half of the business to my business partner. We started that business because his wife had stage 4 cancer. So my contribution to him was, hey, I'll come back and train 10 people on wireless computing. You'll have your workforce, and I'll give you my 50% of the business to take care of your wife, because we know she's dying. This was about you spending time with your wife. And so that month that I moved here in Memphis, she moved to Florida to go to Pensacola Christian College. And so that was in 2003. You showed up at the Navy base in 2007, right?
Yep.
2007. So that was more than 90 days. I was big into powerlifting. I was getting ready for the World Championship powerlifting meet.
That's what he was doing. Like
Right.
he was working
lifting
out.
heavy.
He was powerlifting.
Yeah.
Lifting heavy.
Yeah, I mean, at my last competition, I bench pressed 515 pounds, squatted 700 pounds, and pulled 600 pounds, all natural, and won 2 world champions and 3 national championships and set all the Tennessee state records. So, and I was the smallest person on my team, and I weighed 240 pounds at the time. I weigh 183 pounds now. So different transformation. And then adding this 120-pound pipsqueak to the team was going to be like,
Yeah.
you don't even know what we're talking about here. So we go to the gym, and she's like, what should we do? And I'm like, we're doing bench press today.
Lifting.
And
I had never bench pressed at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Period.
And so we started working out, and then you obviously have to eat after you work out. It's like, hey, do you want to go eat? So we started eating dinner together. And then this is probably where you ought to pick up.
So, yeah, when did it become something?
So when I first asked him if I could work out with him, he had a long distance girlfriend. Basically the office in general knew that. And so I wasn't really worried because I wasn't really looking. So we started eating together just more out of necessity than anything.
You had to work out. You're tired.
Yeah.
So then another a little bit of time went by, a few weeks, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go out, like go to Texas State Brazil, downtown?" And it kind of struck me. I thought that sounds more like a date, and really threw me off. I said, "Hey, don't you have a girlfriend?" He was like, "Oh yeah, I knew you were going to ask that." And so he said, "Yeah, we broke up." I was like, "Oh."
Well, let me tell the backstory to that. I had won a trip to go to the Bahamas. And so I invited her to go to the Bahamas, and we were going to talk about what the next steps were for her and I. And she was very wealthy, owned several restaurants and a nightclub and all this. And she's like, "I'm going to sell all of that, and I want you to quit your job, and I just want you to travel around the world with me." And I had just gotten out of school, just gotten all my security certifications, and my career was actually starting to really lift off the ground. And she goes, "I don't want to have any kids." And so, between not wanting to have kids, because I never really thought about kids up to that point. But then when I was forced with the decision not to have kids, it made me think, ooh, do I really want kids or not? And then, do I really want to give up my career that I just spent all this time doing? And so I was like, I can't take those terms. Yeah. And so we parted ways.
So, but nobody knew that.
But nobody knew that because I didn't tell anybody.
You have a reason to tell anybody.
Right.
So you
So once we figured that out, we did go downtown to Texas State Brazil, and I had to decide, okay, is this worth?
There was a reason for taking her to Texas State Brazil.
I mean, I know your parents. This is a conservative Christian family.
Oh, they thought I was a girl.
Okay, yeah. They thought he was a girl. They thought Terry was a girl for a while. Yeah. So I guess when I said I'm going out with Terry, I guess they thought he was a girl, and I didn't know that. I did not purposely mislead. Right. So at some point they realized Terry's not a girl. I was like, no, Terry's not a girl. Yeah. And so then, of course, my parents were like, "We need to meet him." I was like, "Oh, great." Well, with my track record, if you will,
there was some reservation.
I was like, "Great, it's over now." So
earlier today, you were telling me that you had said to Terry, my parent, let's go meet my parents because then it's going to be over.
Yeah, they're not going to like you, so that'll be it. And
I immediately was like, no, time out.
Give me a chance.
There's nobody that doesn't like me. I might not be their favorite person on the planet, but not like me? I'm not buying that.
So we had that dinner. Yeah. And my parents were like, "We like Terry." Yeah. I was like, "Oh, that's new." But
so at that point in time, did you have a good Christian testimony? You were outspoken. Were you outspoken about your Christianity? That's my question.
Well, let's talk about the ordination. So one of my friends on the powerlifting team said, if you ever want to know anything about the Bible, just ask Terry because he knows everything. And I immediately was like, everything? No, everything is probably not accurate. But I do know more than all of you all because none of you all are saved or even read a Bible. So maybe I do appear like I know everything. So she picked up on that. So then we went to...
And this was before like the date.
Yeah.
It was at dinner one night.
There must be some foundation there.
And I was curious at that point. Right. I was like, "What do you believe about this? What do you believe about this?"
So she's like, "Hey, meet me at Bahama Breeze. We're going to go eat dinner." And we had dinner for what, 2-3 hours?
It was a while.
So 2 or 3 hours. She's like asking me questions like, well, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about Jesus and the Holy Spirit? And what do you believe about deacons, and what do you believe about wives? And as soon as we got to the wife question, I was like, okay, this is over. Because what I'm about to tell you is not popular in today's society, but it's a non-negotiable for me. First, I wanted a wife that would stay at home and raise the children. That was very important to me. But if you look back in my history, I never had a mom to do that. And I wanted my kid. I wanted that. And that was a non-negotiable. And that meant I needed to make enough money to support our family so that she could do that. And women in today's society as a whole are not interested in that concept. Yeah, and that's okay.
It's a thing that has gone away. I know when Susan and I were quite a bit older than you, and it was kind of difficult for us because that was our approach. But it was during a time in America when a lot of women were leaving the house and going to work. So all of my peers now had two incomes, and I'm trying to keep up with the people that went from one to now two. They can run ahead of my ability. And so inflation and other things took off because of that. And the cost of housing went way up because of that. So the paradigms were shifting, and it was difficult to go through that. But God was good and provided, and evidently you guys made it through that too.
Yeah, and I mean, she asked questions like, so the wife question was a big gotcha. The second question that would get people when I would have this conversation is what I believed about salvation. Once you're saved, you're always saved. God's holding you in the palm of his hand, not you holding on to him. I always tell people John 10:28, no one can pluck you out of my hand. That's my God saying to me, I got a hold of you. It's not you got a hold of me.
Wonderful.
So I was not actually intending it to be so intensive, but apparently it drained him. Because I went home thinking, I was just kind of digesting it all. Yes. But the next morning, he calls me. I hadn't even gotten into work yet. And he's like, look, whatever you do, whatever you think about me, can you just not go in and tell people that I've lost it, like I'm crazy? And I was like, why would I do that? And he was like, well, because, we talked about a lot of stuff last night and spiritual things. And I was like, oh, no, I agreed with you. He was like, oh. That's great. Relief. Well, you couldn't tell. You couldn't say anything.
You were just.
No.
Wonderful.
Like when we first started this conversation, you were doing all the talking. You were like, hey, can you give me some feedback?
Yeah.
I was getting no feedback. Yeah, it was like this.
Yeah. But you were just digesting it.
The flashlight and the no emotion, stoic.
Well, you probably weren't expecting some of those answers, even if they were appealing answers.
I was not I mean, honestly, I always go back to that was a hard, that was a challenging moment in my spiritual life. Those years right around there, and there's way more that are totally not relevant.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
so I was at the point where I was the only one my age at the church that we were going to, like remotely my age. Yeah. And I had almost given up, like, where did all of these people my age go? Yeah. And not that I was doing a whole lot better, but I was wondering that. I would go to church and I would just be like, where is everybody? Like, what is happening for people my age to just disappear from church? Yeah. So I had gotten discouraged, honestly. So for him to say, I do believe that, and I believe this, and I believe that you have to trust Christ for salvation. So you don't have to do exactly. Yeah. I was like, I am not an island unto myself. There's other people. Yeah. And in your head that there's other people, but if you never come in contact with other people, it's easy to get discouraged.
Well, and we have to jump around a little bit here, but then that story turned out well. Yes. But now you have some kids. You have how many kids? 4? I'm not going to be able to name them all.
Titus.
Okay.
He's 14. Amaris is 12. Adelaide is going to be 10 in a few.
About to be 10.
Yep. And 5.
Yeah. Okay. And then I want to ask you a little bit about Tally. The rest of your kids are absolutely perfect, and so's Tally.
Perfect?
Well,
that's an interesting word.
They're kids.
Sinners.
They're kids. As kids will be kids. Tally has been opportunity for you that you totally did not expect. I don't know the medical term for what she has.
She has something called Rett syndrome.
Rett syndrome, and that's not Tourette syndrome.
It's not. It's named for Dr. Andreas Rett.
Very rare.
Came together. It is rare. I think the numbers are 1 in 10,000 in America.
To give you perspective, Vanderbilt is one of the leading hospitals for Rett syndrome. And their clinic was only opened once every other month on the 3rd Friday of the month.
So probably like a traveling doctor was.
Well, they had a neurologist and a team, and kids from the local states that can get to Nashville.
Once a month.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all they had.
Go once every other month.
Yeah, they only had enough kids to justify that.
And what, just the meat and potatoes of what this does to her physically, what?
It is a genetic disorder.
Okay.
And so that means it happened when God formed her.
Yes.
But the gene that is mutated controls,
What's the name of that gene?
MECP2. The MECP2 gene. It turns on new developmental stages and turns off, when they're supposed to be done.
Right.
So think about it as a computer.
Right. Your developmental.
It's the CPU that tells your brain, hey, I need to start crawling. And it doesn't turn on.
I probably understand it biologically better than I do digitally.
It's like switches. Yes. It's like a switchboard, literally.
I totally don't understand it biologically.
So what that typically looks like, Holly was a little less on the typical side, but that gene does not really come into play until closer to like 18 months and forward. So you got these little babies, usually girls, because it affects the X chromosome.
Okay.
You have these little babies. They're beautiful and perfect and wonderful. They start walking and they start saying words, and then they hit something.
The gene doesn't tell them.
Because as an infant, she just seemed as normal as any.
Well, we started having problems earlier than that.
Really?
And that ultimately delayed our diagnosis.
Okay.
And COVID hit.
Oh yeah, I've forgotten about that.
So,
What's that whole thing do to you emotionally as that realization starts coming?
9 and day different reaction between the two of us.
Well, you would expect male and female. Who's the hardest on?
Probably me.
Okay.
I think part of mine was over time, because once you figure out, oh, she's 7 months old, she's still not rolling over, and she was supposed to roll over 3 months ago.
Was there denial ever?
A little bit, mainly because I had to keep my sanity. Through that initial COVID, she was born in August of 19. So about 7 months is when we started really wondering what was going on.
Because she was 11 pounds. Yeah. We're like, we already had 3 kids. This is not normal.
Yeah.
So that was March of 2020. That is when everything shut down. Yeah. We couldn't get into the doctor. So I would weigh her with myself, and the scales were not going up. I was like, what is up with this? So I was kind of like, probably just these scales.
Right.
But come June, when we were able to get back into the doctor, our normally very cheerful and reserved doctor came in and she said, what is going on? And
because she's seen, she's seen our other 3 kids.
Yeah.
She did. You're supposed to gain weight over your first year, and she had lost weight from a January weigh-in. She was 5 months old to about 10 months old in June, and she had actually lost 2 ounces. And so we got into Tennessee Early Intervention Services, and we got into PT, and we started going to the cardiologist and the audiologist and the optometrist and the neurologist. And this is all over time because COVID clogged everything. Yeah. So we didn't get all of these done in a month. No. And so we didn't see the neurologist until like April of the next year.
So through all that, you're on an emotional path during that time.
Yes. And at that time, I was very hopeful that it was just, Lord, whatever this is, help us fix it.
Fix it and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, like...
My mindset was completely different.
What was happening to you as it unfolded?
My mindset was, God, give me a name for what's wrong. I literally don't care what it is. Just give me a name so that I can put a face to this situation, and I can study it, I can analyze it, and I can figure out what's in the realm of possible for this kid. Because to me, it was all about what is her potential. I already knew God was on the throne. God's going to take care of it. Not saying that she doesn't think that or believe that, because my mindset was the opposite of hers, which I believe that's why God gives a man and a woman.
Could be. Now, I'm an emotional guy, so I could see myself just crying about it all the time. I mean, did you fall into that?
I don't know that I was crying all the time, but I cried at night fairly often. Just because at night, your thoughts kind of get a hold of you anyway. At least mine do. And they tend to wander if I don't just say, okay, Lord, help me just go to sleep and not overthink things, because I'm an overthinker. And, just the thought that, this kid might never say mom. Yeah. That type of thing.
I should have pointed that out. That one of the issues is she's non-communicative in most ways.
Verbally.
Yeah.
She can communicate on an iPad or with cards by touching them and select.
Sometimes I've even seen her with you guys, maybe when you're feeding her or something, that she want a little more,
or she'll point to her favorite foods. She'll tap her table if she wants.
She is non-verbal. She's non-mobile.
Now, has this been an opportunity at all to testify about Christ when people are around and seeing this burden it is a burden that you carry at times?
We homeschool. I wouldn't say it introduced me to more people, new therapists, and just a world of hurting people in the disability world.
That aperture, like in a camera, expanded.
Okay.
So I do meet new people, but I wouldn't say I have stayed busy, probably doing less of what I should be doing. And I have talked to therapists, and they knew we went to church. They knew that I believed in God. And I would speak of the Lord. I think I'm more nervous to say, what do you think about the Lord, and what do you think about eternity?
To me, it makes me ask the question, what would you do if you didn't have God, if we didn't have this great eternal faith that we have to go through this kind of a trial?
And I set up a Rhett Mom dinner, which there were, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us that met for dinner. Right. And I did send them an invitation to our church, and many of the ones that I have met, they do go to church, and they'll speak about the Lord on their Facebook pages or whatever. So I guess I observe it, and I kind of monitor, how are you doing, and I have reached out to other moms, maybe in different situations, but still within the disability community. Like, I'm praying for you. Can I encourage you in any way? So I do try to remain open. I see a lot of frustrated and fearful moms.
It's a scary time to go through.
And so I I try not to portray that myself, because I am trusting Christ to take care of her and help provide for us and provide for her.
That kind of leads me to a question that I like to always use in these interviews. It's a perfect question for this moment then. Can you tell me about a time, and maybe it's during this time, so most people, it's about how close you are to God, or how close you've ever been to God. Most people, when I ask them that, most of the time I get someone saying right now, but not every time. So through this whole trial in life, it was completely unexpected. Can you tell me about a time that you've been the closest you remember to God?
I feel like I have grown closer to him over the years, that sanctification process, that we've talked about. Many years ago, when my 12-year-old was born, that year I decided that I grew up in a Christian home, went to a Christian school, went to a Christian college, and I had never sat down and read the Bible cover to cover. I mean, I had been all over the Bible throughout life, but I was like, no, I'm going to sit down and do it. So that year that she was born, so 2012, I read the whole Bible all the way through. And I wouldn't say I was closest to God that year, but it kind of helped me understand, the Holy Spirit is my teacher. As I read the scripture. And that has kind of kept me encouraged to continue reading. And throughout Tali's diagnosis process, which was about 2 years, from hey, something's going on for her, to hey, it's Rett syndrome. It has kind of kept me grounded. Not to say I was never sad. It's not to say I wasn't heartbroken.
It's not curable.
But
it's not curable.
But I decided to keep reading my Bible and keep trusting. And the Lord has shown so many times, hey, I've got you. And so fast forward to today, I'm still trusting the Lord, and I know that He will continue to teach me as I continue to stay in His Word. I won't ever be perfect, but I can be more like Christ. He can help me be more like Christ.
Let me give him my perspective of all of that, because it's a little different than hers, but it's from the outside looking in, where hers is the inside looking out. When we were married, we were both working. She stopped working at the Navy base in January. Titus was born in February. Going from being productive citizen, making money and being out in the workforce, to staying at home, getting the house ready, transitioning to being a mother, and having the first child, all of that happened in about 60-day period. And I don't think either one of us realized how hard that was going to be in change, from having a child that was colic, to spitting up, to crying, to being a first-time mother. And depression, I think kind of postpartum depression kicked in. And it took a while through, and plus she was finishing her degree, because I promised her dad that if we got married, she would get a bachelor's degree, because if something ever happened to me, I wanted her to be able. So she was doing her degree while feeding this child every. So it was a massive life change. But then fast forward to Amaris, which was 2 years later, whatever was broken, it was like the moment that Amaris was born, everything was healed. it was really strange to watch from the outside, watching her go through that. It was like there was a revival period when Maurice was born, with her Christian life, her joy, her happiness was restored. Not that she was sad or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just a change, like a paradigm change, like it was almost a new person.
Is he describing something that's the truth? I'm confused by that. What's your take on that?
So when my oldest was born, that was a super rough year. And I probably had postpartum depression.
Right.
Which we automatically
this
think.
is what he's observed.
This is what I'm observing.
Oh, it was truly an awful time. And it got a little tense between us because I was horrible. Like I was horrible. Yeah. And I felt bad that I was being horrible. You know? So yeah.
But I was like, you got to snap out of this.
Yeah,
like you've
through that together.
You literally got to pull up your bootstraps, and we got to get on with this because life isn't changing now.
So
which isn't ideal.
It's interesting that he says that. I tell people myself that whatever broke when I had Titus, right. You know, it came kind of back together when I had.
Well, that's a beautiful thing. Though. It's really interesting.
And honestly, that's no offense to my oldest child.
No, it's got nothing to do with him at all.
That's yeah. Shout out. He disappeared. And I loved him. Yeah, like I wasn't trying to kick him out.
It's just the development of life, and there's times where you really go down, and you need so the healing of the Lord.
And I would say that was your valley since we've been married.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. And then I like to end always on the same question. And Terry, I asked Kelly the last one. I'll ask you this one. Can you, and it might be through this time, but you just tell me a time when I know just as sure as I'm sitting here that this table is brown, and I know that God is going to lead me to eternity. He has revealed to me through experiences in life that he is real. And is there a time in your life when God has really revealed himself to you as to be real?
In the moment or in hindsight? Because there are definitely different times where if you asked me that question, I would answer it differently. In hindsight, pre-salvation, living in the hood, having homeless people, living under a bridge myself at one time, to I had a friend get kidnapped and chopped up and put in a river, and I was going to go stay the night with him that night. And my dad said no. My dad wasn't a Christian, but there was something, and I say it's God.
Yeah, God was trying to reveal himself to you.
Said, you're not going to go.
Yeah.
Another time is I had some friends that I was going to go stay the night with. We were going to go camping out to the lake.
After you're saved?
No, this is still before. They captured 2 elderly people and set them on fire in a car. And had I been there, I would have been killed by the state of Oklahoma just for being with them when that happened. All that to be said, that's just 2 of probably hundreds of events pre-salvation where God was preserving me to the point where I could accept Christ.
Since salvation, has he revealed himself to you?
Oh, 100%. That conversation where I sat down with God and I said, it's me and you. Like, I need you to teach me because there's nobody here. Yeah, there's a youth minister. Yeah, there's a pastor, but I see them for 3 hours out of the week. I need to hear the other 24. And just getting the foundation and letting the Holy Spirit work through me. Was I perfect? Heavens no. Am I perfect now? No. But I'm better now than I was then. And I can see the sanctification and the transformation and being transferred into the image of Christ through all of these events. And I'm really excited to see what's next, because it's interesting looking at your life in the rearview mirror, which is very small, but it's crystal clear. Then looking into the future, which you have a big windshield, but it's very unclear. And I love that paradigm switch, because I'm looking forward, seeing in the back, crystal clear, seeing into the future, just with enough light to take the next step. It's beautiful.
God got us this far,
right?
And He'll clearly take us on.
I mean, how can you trust God for salvation if you can't trust Him for the next step?
Every day.
I mean, it's got to be that way. There's no other way.
Well, you guys, thanks so much for being transparent and taking the time to just share. I know that there's a ton more we could talk about in an interview like that, but I hope, my prayer is that this will be helpful to someone else who doesn't know who God is, or doesn't know about salvation, or this thing that we talk about. You can truly know where your eternity will be.